Mr. President, could you discuss some of the recent public accounts of CIA activities in South Vietnam, particularly the stories of or reports of how the CIA has undertaken certain independent operations? They're independent of other elements of the American government that are in South Vietnam.
The fact of the matter is that Mr. McCone sits in the National Security Council. I imagine I see him at least 3 or 4 times a week, ordinarily. We have worked very closely together in the National Security Council in the last 2 months, attempting to meet the problems we faced in South Vietnam. I can find nothing, and I've looked through the record very carefully over the last 9 months, and I could go back further to indicate that the CIA has done anything but support policy. It does not create policy. It attempts to execute it in those areas where it has competence and responsibility. I know that the transfer of Mr. John Richardson, who's a very dedicated public servant, has led to surmises, but I can just assure you flatly that the CIA has not carried out independent activities, but is operated under close control of the Director of Central Intelligence, operating with the cooperation of the National Security Council and under my instructions. So I think that while the CIA may have made mistakes, as we all do on different occasions, and has had many successes, which may go unheralded, in my opinion in this case, it's unfair to charge them as they have been charged. I think they've done a good job.
Former head of the CIA, Alan Dulles, says in an interview in the Journal American today that reports of disputes between the CIA and the State Department and various branches of the government in South Vietnam have arisen because, quote, of a lack of a clear-cut operational policy in Washington. And then he goes on to say that he thinks what's needed is less backbiting between U.S. agency officials. In view of the defense you just gave of CIA, would you care to agree with Dulles' charge or contest it?
I'd agree with the last part of it, that the agencies, as we all know, we're faced with a very difficult problem in South Vietnam, which we're all familiar with, both in the military and the political side. Men have different views about what actions we should take, and they talk to members of the press, to all of you, in Saigon, here in Washington. But I must say that as of today, and I think this is particularly true since General Taylor and Secretary McNamara came back, I know of no disagreement between the State Department at the top, CIA at the top, Defense at the top, White House, and Ambassador Lord on what our basic policies will be and what steps we will take to implement it. Now, if down below there's disagreement, I think in part it will be because they're not wholly informed of what actions we're taking. Some of them are necessarily confidential, but I think our policy, though we can't say what effect it's going to have, I think we are in agreement of about what we ought to do. I would think that Saigon and personnel in the various agencies should support that policy, because that's the policy we're going to carry out for a while. Yes.
Mr. President, how do you feel about Senator Gruning's proposal to set up a congressional committee as a watchdog over the CIA?
I think the present committee, there's one in both the House and Senate, which maintains very close liaison with the CIA, is best, considering the sensitive nature of the Central Intelligence Agency's work. As you know, there is a congressional committee in the House, one in the Senate, composed of members of the Appropriations Committee and the Armed Services Committee. They meet frequently with Mr. McCone. He also testifies before the Foreign Relations Committee of the House and Senate and the General Armed Services Committee, and I think the Congress has, through that organization, the means of keeping a liaison with them. In addition, I have an advisory council, which was headed by Dr. Killian formerly. Now Mr. Clark Clifford includes Jimmy Doolittle and others, Robert Murphy, who also serve as an advisory committee to me on the work of the intelligence community. I'm well satisfied with the present arrangement. Yes.